For 18 long months, my daughter-in-law had been systematically destroying my life with medications I never consented to taking. The revelation came to me on December 28th, while I sat motionless in my favorite armchair, deliberately pretending the substances still had their intended effect on my consciousness. Marina believed I remained in that familiar fog when she leaned close to whisper urgently to my son Ricardo. After New Year's, we move forward with the facility placement. I've already secured his spot at Riverside Gardens. They're expecting him by January 5th. Ricardo's voice carried hesitation as he responded, "Are you absolutely certain this is necessary?" She released an exasperated breath that made my blood turn cold despite my outward calm. Just observe him sitting there, completely vacant and drooling. The medication regimen works flawlessly. Once the commitment becomes official and we obtain legal authority over his affairs, this property becomes ours entirely. $920,000 with no encumbrances whatsoever. My breathing remained controlled and steady, while fury built pressure inside my chest like steam in a sealed vessel. She remained completely unaware that I had been disposing of that doctored coffee for several weeks now. She had no concept that every conversation, every whispered scheme, every calculated word had been captured on a digital recording device. Anyone who has experienced the profound betrayal of watching someone they trusted systematically dismantle their existence while maintaining a facade of concern will understand what I am about to describe. Because the most satisfying form of justice sometimes involves allowing malicious individuals to become entangled in the very snares they set for others. The laboratory analysis of my blood would alter everything fundamentally. However, let me explain the journey that brought me to that pivotal moment. March 3rd, 2023, marked the beginning of this nightmare. The morning following my wife Helena's funeral service, Marina's campaign commenced in earnest. Throughout Helena's decline, during those final painful months, Marina had positioned herself as indispensable, preparing my morning coffee without fail, delivering it to my home office with an expression of practiced sympathy etched across her features. "You must maintain your physical strength, Paolo," she would tell me with apparent concern. My trust in her sincerity was absolute and unquestioning. Heaven, forgive my naivety, but I believed every word that came from her mouth. By early May, I recognized something fundamental had shifted in my physical and mental state. Each morning around 10:30, this overwhelming exhaustion would descend upon me like a heavy blanket. My cognitive processes became sluggish and unclear. Language seemed to slip away from my grasp when I attempted to articulate even simple thoughts. During evening meals with family, I would lose the thread of discussions. Mid-conversation, unable to recall what we had been talking about mere moments before, Marina had explanations ready for everyone who noticed. "It's the grief manifesting," she would say with a knowing nod. Combined with his advancing age, Paolo will be 71 next spring. 69, I wanted to correct her. I had only recently turned 69 years old, but I felt too mentally depleted to form the words of protest. The pattern of morning drowsiness became my new normal reality. Coffee arrived at 9 o'clock. Mental fog descended by 10:30, and I would find myself napping by early afternoon. Marina began inserting herself into my medical appointments with increasing frequency. "He's experiencing significant confusion lately," she would inform Dr. Ramirez during visits. Then she would place her hand on my shoulder in a gesture of supportive concern. "Tell the doctor about that incident when you forgot the oven was on, Paolo." No such incident had occurred. But sitting there in that examination room, groggy and struggling to organize my thoughts coherently, I couldn't marshal the mental clarity required to contradict her fabrications. The financial irregularities began that summer. Paolo, "You really shouldn't be managing your own financial accounts anymore," Ricardo said to me one afternoon in late June. "Marina discovered several overdue utility bills scattered on your kitchen counter. Bills I had never laid eyes on previously. Bills that Marina must have extracted from my mailbox and strategically placed to support her narrative. We're doing this because we care about your well-being," she said as she smoothly took possession of my checkbook. "Allow me to assist you with the monthly household expenses. My pension provided $3,400 each month. Helena and I had sacrificed and saved for decades to eliminate the mortgage on our home completely. My typical monthly expenses should not have exceeded $2,000 at most, yet somehow I constantly found myself without available funds. Where is all my money disappearing to? I asked Marina one morning in late August, my confusion genuine. "Prescription medications are extremely costly, Paolo," she replied without hesitation. "Your Lunesta prescription alone costs $92 monthly." Lunesta? I had never taken Lunesta at any point in my entire life. That inconsistency in her story represented the first crack in their carefully constructed deception, but the medications kept my thoughts too scattered and disorganized to investigate properly. By mid-October, Marina had begun spreading stories among our neighbors about my supposed episodes of confusion and disorientation. Mrs. Chen from the house next door started regarding me with expressions of genuine pity whenever our paths crossed. "I feel terrible about what's happening to Paolo," she told Marina near the mailboxes one afternoon while I stood within earshot. "Early-onset dementia at his age is absolutely devastating for families. We're doing our best to manage the situation," Marina responded with practiced sadness. "Some days show more clarity than others." I desperately wanted to shout that nothing was wrong with my cognitive abilities, but the words emerged slurred and incoherent from my mouth. Marina would simply offer that sorrowful smile and gently guide me back toward the house. The social isolation was methodical and deliberate in its execution. My weekly card game with longtime friends. "Paolo doesn't feel up to participating anymore." The book discussion group at the community center. Too overstimulating for him in his current condition. Even my younger brother Miguel stopped making his regular visits after Marina convinced him I had become unpredictable and occasionally aggressive. "It's safer if we minimize his social interactions," she explained to Ricardo with apparent reluctance. "He becomes agitated and hostile around other people." Agitated. The only thing that agitated me was observing this woman systematically steal my life, piece by piece, while everyone praised her devoted caregiving. By November, Marina had successfully convinced my family that I required constant supervision for my own safety. "He left the stovetop burner on last Tuesday," she informed Ricardo with concern. "A complete fabrication. And the day before yesterday, I discovered him wandering through the neighborhood in his sleepwear at dawn. Another absolute lie. But the timing of these reports was perfect. I would stumble downstairs around noon, still foggy from whatever substances she had dissolved in my coffee, and encounter concerned family members discussing my apparent deterioration. "Perhaps we should research memory care facilities," Marina suggested during our Thanksgiving gathering, purely for his safety and well-being. That particular moment triggered my realization of what she meant by saying the blood test results would fundamentally change everything. 3 weeks prior, on November 8th, I had made a decision that ultimately saved my life. I started pretending to consume the coffee while actually disposing of it. The discovery happened entirely by accident. That particular morning, I had knocked over the mug while reaching for my reading glasses. Marina quickly prepared a replacement cup, but I was already behind schedule for what I believed was a doctor's appointment. Rather than drinking it, I grabbed my jacket and departed immediately. 4 hours later, my mind felt clearer and sharper than it had experienced in months. That evening, I conducted a deliberate experiment. I emptied the coffee into the kitchen drain when Marina wasn't observing, refilled the mug with plain water, and pretended to drink normally. Then I simply waited to see what would happen. No crushing fatigue materialized. No mental confusion descended. For the first time since March, I could think with complete clarity. The following morning, I repeated the process. And again, the day after. Within 1 week, I understood with absolute certainty exactly what had been happening to me systematically. The deliberate drugging, the manipulation of my finances, the calculated social isolation. Marina wasn't simply stealing my financial resources. She was stealing my identity, my competence, my fundamental right to exist as a thinking, autonomous human being. However, I needed concrete proof. Real, verifiable evidence that would hold up in legal proceedings and expose her completely. To my family, that's when I drove to the electronics store and spent $97 on a digital audio recorder. Because if Marina believed she could successfully gaslight a man who had dedicated 42 years to teaching philosophy, analyzing logical fallacies, studying human motivation, and understanding how arguments truly function, she had made a catastrophic error in judgment. I was about to become the architect of her complete downfall. My strategy required precise timing and careful execution. But first, I needed to document exactly what substances she was introducing into my coffee each morning. The blood analysis was merely the opening move. She had absolutely no awareness I was recording every single word when her actual plan finally emerged into the open. December 12th arrived, on a Tuesday morning. Marina believed I sat in my usual drug-induced stupor, slumped in my armchair with the empty coffee mug balanced on the side table. The Sony recording device was concealed inside my cardigan pocket, its small red indicator light blinking steadily. "The attorney says we require medical documentation from multiple sources," she whispered into her phone as she paced into the kitchen. 3 separate physicians stating he's mentally incompetent for legal purposes. I maintained my eyes at half-closure, breathing slowly and steadily in a simulation of drowsiness. Dr. Ramirez has already provided his signature. He notes that Paulo shows unmistakable signs of cognitive decline. I made certain to mention that stovetop incident and the early morning wandering episode during our consultation. Both incidents were complete inventions, but Dr. Ramirez accepted them without question or verification. Dr. Stevens from the Memory Disorder Clinic will evaluate him next week. I've already provided him with detailed information about Paulo's condition. The third signature should be straightforward to obtain. I've located a neurologist who specializes in these types of cases. My blood felt like ice water in my veins. This conspiracy extended far beyond simply stealing the house. This was about having me declared legally incompetent in court proceedings. "Once we obtain the court order, everything transfers automatically," she continued. "The house, his monthly pension, the life insurance settlement from Helena's death. Ricardo suspects absolutely nothing. He genuinely believes we're providing compassionate care. Life insurance. Helena's $55,000 policy that I had intended to leave for our grandson Felipe's college education fund." Marina's voice became clearer as she moved closer to the living room. "The property assessor came yesterday while Ricardo was at his job. $920,000. Can you believe that amount? Nearly $1 million for this outdated property." She paused, probably verifying I remained asleep in the chair. "The nursing facility is absolutely perfect for our purposes. Riverside Gardens. Memory care unit. Once he's officially committed, we can visit perhaps twice annually and perform for any observers as the grieving, devoted family. Meanwhile, we liquidate the house and relocate to Arizona as we've been planning." Arizona. They had been orchestrating this scheme for months, possibly longer. The elegant aspect is that it's all completely legal, she continued. Power of attorney for an incompetent family member. The court will commend us for taking such excellent care of poor. Confused Paolo. That night, while Marina attended her book club meeting, the same book club she claimed was too stimulating for my compromised condition, I searched through her handbag systematically. Real estate brochures for Scottsdale condominiums. 3 different properties, all bookmarked and highlighted, with prices ranging from $450,000 to $620,000. A handwritten note in her precise script. Finalize house sale by February 8th. Relocate by March 15th. But the most incriminating evidence was concealed in a manila folder hidden behind her collection of romance novels. Power of attorney documents already completed, waiting only for signatures. Medical commitment paperwork for Riverside Gardens, dated January 10th, and a hand-drawn timeline in Marina's meticulous handwriting. December 8th through 22nd, secure medical evaluations. December 23rd through January 1st, New Year's celebration, maintain normalcy, don't alarm Ricardo. January 2nd through 8th, file legal documents. January 10th, commitment proceeding. January 22nd, power of attorney hearing. February 8th, property closing. March 15th, Arizona. She had choreographed my complete destruction like a business transaction on a spreadsheet. The following morning, I pretended to struggle with my breakfast oatmeal while Marina made her daily phone call to her accomplice. Dr. Stevens confirmed Paolo's appointment for December 22nd. I described the incontinence episodes and the violent, aggressive outbursts in detail. Incontinence episodes, violent outbursts. The fabrications were becoming increasingly elaborate and serious. Ricardo is beginning to ask questions, though, she said after listening to the person on the other end. Last evening, he suggested that perhaps his father just needs adjusted medication, not institutional placement. She paused to listen. I understand completely. We're too far along to reverse course now. I've already placed a deposit. On the Scottsdale condominium, $22,000 down payment, $22,000 from what source? Then I remembered my missing pension deposits over recent months. The memory care facility charges $5,200 monthly, she continued. Insurance coverage might pay half that amount, but it's irrelevant financially. Once we liquidate the house, we're financially secure for the rest of our lives. Financially secure for life. Built on my life's work, on the home Helena. And I had built together through decades of sacrifice. That afternoon, Marina brought me my coffee with excessive cheerfulness and sweetness. Here you are, Paolo, your favorite blend. I observed her walk away, then carefully lifted the mug to examine it. In the bottom, white granular residue that hadn't completely dissolved in the hot liquid. I moistened my fingertip and tasted the residue cautiously. Bitter, chalky, definitely not sugar or cream. I poured the entire coffee into a mason jar I had hidden behind my chair, sealed it securely, and labeled it with the date, evidence sample number 1. The following morning brought the same routine. Marina crushed something into my coffee while she believed I was absorbed in reading the newspaper. This time I observed her palm a small pill bottle before returning it quickly to her purse. Sample number 2 went into another jar. By December 17th, I had collected 7 samples and 53 minutes of recorded conversations. Marina had unknowingly confessed to drugging me, falsifying medical reports, stealing my pension income, and conspiring to commit me against my will to institutional care. However, the most disturbing recording came on December 19th. The most satisfying aspect is Paolo will never comprehend what happened to him, she told her accomplice on the phone. I still had not identified who received these calls. By the time he realizes what's actually happening, he'll be locked inside memory care with absolutely no legal rights whatsoever. Even if he attempts to tell anyone, who would believe a demented old man's accusations? She actually laughed out loud at that thought. Honestly, it's almost merciful when you think about it. What quality of life does he really have anyway? Sitting around feeling sorry for himself since Helena died. At least this way his death will fund something worthwhile. My death. She was already casually discussing and planning for my death as if it were inevitable and imminent. That revelation made me understand I wasn't simply fighting for my house or my financial resources. I was fighting for my actual survival and life. And the recording device had captured every single word of it. My plan required absolutely perfect timing. But first, I had to make a choice that would fundamentally change everything about this situation. December 20th arrived on a Wednesday morning. I sat in my home office, staring at 7 mason jars filled with drugged coffee and a digital recorder containing Patricia's confessions. Wait, Marina's confessions. The evidence was absolutely damning, but I needed more than her recorded words against mine. I required medical proof that would be scientifically unassailable. The appointment with Dr. Stevens was scheduled for 2 days from now. Marina's hand-selected neurologist, who would rubber-stamp my mental incompetence without genuine evaluation. If I appeared confused and disoriented as expected, he would sign the documents that would imprison me permanently in institutional care. However, if I appeared completely lucid and mentally sharp, Marina would immediately know her drugging scheme had failed. That's when the beautiful simplicity of my situation became apparent to me. Marina had inadvertently provided me with perfect cover for conducting my own investigation. I called Dr. Rebecca Martinez's office directly. She had been Helena's oncologist, someone who actually knew me before Marina's campaign of systematic destruction. I'd like to schedule some confidential blood work, I told her nurse. Comprehensive toxicology screening with full analysis. Is this related to your current medical treatment, Mr. Paulo? No, I said carefully. I have serious concerns about medications I may have been administered without my knowledge or consent. Dr. Martinez agreed to see me that same afternoon during her lunch break, away from her regular office where Marina might learn of the appointment. Paulo, she said, when I walked into the private laboratory, you look remarkably healthy for someone supposedly suffering from advancing dementia. That's because I don't have dementia, Rebecca. I have a daughter-in-law with a pill crusher and a real estate investment scheme. Her expression shifted from confusion to alarm as I explained the 18-month timeline in detail. The morning coffee routine, the systematic isolation from family and friends, the falsified medical reports. I need you to test my blood for sedatives and other substances, I said, and I need official documentation that my cognitive function is completely normal. She drew 4 vials of blood and spent 40 minutes administering comprehensive cognitive tests. Memory recall, pattern recognition, complex problem-solving exercises. Paulo, your test scores are in the 97th percentile for your age demographic, she said when we finished. There's absolutely nothing wrong with your cognitive abilities. Then why do I feel foggy and confused every morning after consuming coffee? Because someone is systematically drugging you, she said grimly. These blood samples will tell us exactly what substances and in what quantities. While we waited for the laboratory results to process, I made my second crucial decision. I drove to the electronics store and purchased a Wyze security camera for $39. Tiny device, no larger than a golf ball, with wireless capability and smartphone notifications. That evening, while Marina attended Ricardo's parent-teacher conference for Felipe, I installed the camera behind the bread container on my kitchen counter. Perfect angle, to capture the coffee maker and whoever used it. The following morning, I pretended to shuffle downstairs late, playing the confused elderly man role perfectly while the camera recorded Marina's routine in high definition. 8:51 a.m., Marina enters kitchen, initiates coffee maker. 8:53 a.m., retrieves pill bottle from her handbag. Crushes 2 tablets using the back of a metal spoon. 8:55 a.m., stirs crushed pills into my coffee mug. Adds extra cream to mask any bitter taste. 8:56 a.m., brings coffee to my office with her practiced, concerned smile. Here's your morning coffee, Paulo, all captured in perfect high-definition video. By early afternoon, Dr. Martinez called with the blood analysis results. Paulo, you have 2.7 milligrams of esopiclone in your system. That's a full therapeutic dose of Lunesta taken daily for extended months. It would cause exactly the symptoms you've described to me. Memory problems, mental confusion, drowsiness, difficulty with speech and language. Is that enough to prove I'm being poisoned deliberately? It's enough to send someone to prison for years, she replied. That afternoon I made copies of absolutely everything. Blood test results, video footage, audio recordings, Marina's timeline, the falsified medical reports. One complete set went into my safe. Deposit box at First National Bank. Another complete set went to my attorney, Margaret Hayes, accompanied by a sealed letter explaining the entire situation. If anything happens to me, I told Margaret, if I'm suddenly committed to a nursing facility or declared incompetent in court, open this envelope immediately and contact the police. Margaret looked puzzled by my request. Paulo, you seem completely lucid and mentally sharp to me. That's because I am, I replied. But tomorrow, I'm going to deliver the performance of my lifetime. My appointment with Dr. Stevens was December 22nd. Marina expected me to arrive drugged, confused, easy to manipulate into a dementia diagnosis. Instead, I would give her exactly what she wanted while recording every lie she told. Because sometimes the most effective way to expose a liar is to allow them to believe they're winning completely. The next morning, I drank the coffee. All of it. Every drop. Marina's drugs hit my system like a freight train. Collision, but this time I was prepared for the effects, and this time I had witnesses who knew I was deliberately acting. New Year's morning would be her last day of freedom, but she had absolutely no idea the trap was already closing around her. The appointment that was supposed to seal my fate became the beginning of Marina's complete downfall. December 22nd arrived. I appeared at Dr. Stevens's office exactly as Marina had planned, groggy, confused, stumbling slightly from the double dose of esopiclone I'd forced myself to consume that morning, but concealed in my jacket pocket, the digital recorder was capturing every word of the consultation. "Dr. Stevens, this is my father-in-law, Paulo," Marina said, guiding me to a chair as if I were helpless and incapable. As I mentioned during our phone conversation, his condition has deteriorated rapidly in recent weeks. Dr. Stevens was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 43 years old, with the kind of smooth confidence that comes from rubber-stamping difficult family decisions without genuine investigation. "Tell me about his symptoms in detail," he said, not even making eye contact with me directly. "Severe memory loss, disorientation, wandering episodes," Marina recited smoothly. "Yesterday he asked me 6 times what year it was. He's becoming aggressive and hostile when we try to help him with basic tasks." I sat there motionless, allowing my head to droop forward, occasionally mumbling incoherently, the perfect picture of advancing dementia. Has he experienced any violent outbursts or aggressive behavior? Just last week he threw a coffee mug directly at me. Marina's voice carried just the right note of long-suffering patience. Screamed that I was trying to poison him. The paranoia is becoming worse daily. Dr. Stevens nodded sympathetically, not questioning anything. Classic presentation of advancing dementia. Mr. Paulo, can you tell me what month this currently is? I stared blankly at him, then looked around the examination room with manufactured confusion. I don't... Where are we exactly? It's December, Paulo, Marina said softly with practiced gentleness. We're at the doctor's office for your appointment, remember? For 25 minutes, I delivered the performance of my life, stumbling over simple questions, forgetting Marina's name mid-sentence, asking repeatedly why we were in this location. Dr. Stevens took extensive notes, occasionally exchanging knowing glances with Marina that communicated shared understanding. I'm sorry to confirm what you suspected, he told Marina when the evaluation concluded. Moderate to severe cognitive impairment with significant decline. I'll prepare the documentation for memory care placement immediately. How quickly can we move forward with this? Marina asked with apparent concern. His safety is our primary concern now. I can have the official papers ready by Monday after Christmas. Riverside Gardens is an excellent facility with specialized care. Perfect, Marina said. Everything was falling into place exactly as she'd orchestrated, except I was recording every fraudulent word for legal proceedings. That evening, while Marina celebrated with Ricardo over dinner, explaining that the doctor says Paulo needs specialized care now, I uploaded the video footage to my laptop computer. 21 separate mornings of Marina crushing pills into my coffee with methodical precision. Clear, absolutely undeniable evidence of systematic poisoning. I burned copies onto 4 different drives and mailed one to my brother Miguel in Chicago with a note. Open this immediately if I disappear or am committed. December 25th brought Marina's most damaging confession yet. I was pretending to nap in my chair when she made another phone call, this time pacing the living room freely, believing I was too drugged to understand language. The commitment papers are signed and official. January 10th, we transport him to Riverside Gardens and walk away. Permanently. She paused, listening to whoever was on the other end of the line. No, Ricardo knows absolutely nothing about the house sale. I told him we're just researching options for Paulo's care. He thinks we'll visit weekly and bring Felipe for holidays. Another pause as she listened. Are you serious? Once Paulo is locked up institutionally, we're gone completely. Ricardo can visit his demented father alone if he wants. We'll be in Scottsdale by mid-March. And Felipe can spend summers with us instead of wasting time in this frozen, miserable place. My grandson, she was planning to separate Felipe from his grandfather permanently. The beauty of it is everything is completely legal, she continued. Power of attorney allows me to sell everything. The pension gets redirected to pay for his institutional care, and if he dies in that place, which honestly wouldn't be the worst outcome, we inherit everything free and clear with no complications. She actually articulated, hoping for my death. While I sat 3 meters away from her, 18 months of careful planning, but it's finally paying off completely. By New Year's Day, we'll be approaching millionaire status. That night, I called Detective Sarah Brown at the Minneapolis Police Department. Margaret Hayes had recommended her as someone who specialized in elder abuse cases with extensive experience. Detective Brown, I need to report multiple crimes in progress. Several felonies involving elder abuse, fraud, and criminal conspiracy. Sir, can you come to the station and file a formal complaint? I can do significantly better than that, I replied. I can provide video evidence, audio recordings, and medical documentation of an 18-month drugging scheme against an elderly person. 24 hours later, I sat in Detective Brown's office with manila folders full of comprehensive evidence. Blood tests showing deliberate poisoning, video footage of Marina crushing pills, audio recordings of her admitting to fraud, forgery and conspiracy. Mr. Paulo, this is one of the most comprehensive elder abuse cases I've ever encountered in my career, Detective Brown said. Your daughter-in-law is facing serious felony charges with significant prison time. I want her arrested, I said, but I need you to wait until December 27th. Detective Brown looked puzzled by my request. Why the delay? Because Marina has one more performance scheduled. New Year's morning, she's going to tell my family that I'm too far deteriorated to remain home. She's going to show them the nursing facility commitment papers and explain how she's been protecting everyone from my dangerous behavior. You want your family to hear her lies before we arrest her? I want my son to understand exactly who he married, I said, and I want Marina to believe she's won right up until the handcuffs click shut. Detective Brown smiled grimly. We'll be ready and waiting. December 26th brought Marina's final critical mistake. She brought home real estate. Documents for the house sale, leaving them on the kitchen counter while she ran errands. Sale price $875,000 to Peterson Development Group. Closing date January 6th, just 5 days after New Year's. She had already sold our family home behind everyone's backs, but what Marina didn't know was that I'd been busy making my own calls, arranging my own transactions. She chose the wrong opponent for this game. New Year's morning, 2025. Marina woke up early, humming. While she prepared breakfast, probably fantasizing about her new Arizona condominium. She had absolutely no idea this would be the last morning she'd spend as a free woman. "Coffee's ready, Paolo," she called, bringing me the usual drugged cup. I took it gratefully, made a show of sipping it slowly, while Marina bustled around preparing for Ricardo and Felipe's arrival for New Year's brunch. What she didn't observe was me pouring most of it into the potted plant beside my chair. The same plant that had been slowly dying for weeks from her daily poison doses accumulating in the soil. By 10:30 a.m., Ricardo and Felipe arrived with wrapped gifts and forced holiday cheer. My 13-year-old grandson gave me a careful hug, the kind you give someone you think is fragile and mentally deteriorating. "Hi, Grandpa," he said softly. "Mom says you haven't been feeling very well lately." "I'm feeling better than I have in months," I told him honestly, which made Marina shoot me a sharp warning. "Look, Paolo's having one of his clearer moments," she explained quickly to Ricardo. "They come and go unpredictably now." During gift opening, Marina kept checking her watch obsessively. She had a timeline to follow, papers to present, a family to convince of her narrative. At noon exactly, she made her move. "Ricardo, can I speak with you privately in the kitchen, please?" Felipe was distracted with his new video game system, so I followed quietly, staying just around the corner where I could hear every word clearly. "Your father had another serious episode Wednesday night." Marina began her performance. "He was wandering the neighborhood at 3 a.m. in his underwear. Mrs. Chen had to call me to come get him. Another complete fabrication. I'd been asleep in my bed at 3 a.m. Wednesday. I didn't want to ruin New Year's, but we cannot wait any longer," she continued. "Dr. Stevens says Paolo needs immediate placement for everyone's safety." The rustle of papers as she showed Ricardo the commitment documents. "Riverside Gardens has a bed available January 10th. I've already completed all the paperwork." "Marina, this seems so sudden and drastic," Ricardo said with uncertainty. "Ricardo, look at these incident reports. More paper shuffling sounds, violent outbursts, incontinence, leaving the stove on 4 separate times. I've been protecting you from how bad it's gotten. All fabricated, every single incident." "What about the house?" "We'll have to sell it, obviously." "The memory care." "Facility costs $5,200 monthly, even with his pension and insurance. We'll need the property equity to cover his care long-term." Ricardo's voice carried doubt. "How long do these facilities? What's the average length of stay?" Marina's tone shifted to gentle sympathy. "Honey, people with your father's condition don't typically survive more than 4 to 6 years, but at least he'll be safe and properly medicated." Properly medicated? She was already planning to drug me. Into oblivion permanently? "I know this is difficult," she continued, "but think about Felipe. Do you want him remembering his grandfather as a confused, angry old man? Better to preserve the good memories we have. That's when I stepped into the kitchen deliberately. What good memories would those be exactly, Marina? She spun around, startled by my sudden appearance and lucid voice. Paulo, you should be resting in your chair. 18 months of good memories, I continued calmly, like when you told everyone I had incontinence problems, or when you claimed I threw a coffee mug at you violently. Marina's face went pale. Ricardo, your father is having another episode of paranoia. Or perhaps the good memory of you crushing Lunesta into my coffee every single morning since March. Ricardo looked between us, utterly confused. Paulo, what are you talking about? I'm talking about this, I said, reaching into my cardigan pocket and pulling out the digital recorder. I pressed play. Marina's voice filled the kitchen. The beauty of it is everything is completely legal. Power of attorney for an incompetent relative. The court will thank us for taking such excellent care of poor, confused Paulo. Ricardo's face went completely white. Marina, what is that recording? I fast-forwarded to another clip. Once he's committed institutionally, we can visit twice yearly and perform as the grieving family. Meanwhile, we liquidate the house and relocate to Arizona as we've been planning. This is fabricated, Marina said quickly, desperately. Ricardo, your father is delusional and confused. Another clip played. The pills work flawlessly. Once he's locked up, we're gone completely. Ricardo stared at his wife as if seeing a complete stranger. Marina, you've been drugging him deliberately? Of course not, she said. This is exactly what I mean about his paranoid delusions. I pulled out my phone and showed them the video footage. Marina, clear as day, crushing pills with the back of a spoon and stirring them into my coffee. December 23rd, 8:53 a.m., I said calmly. December 24th, same time. I have 21 different videos, Ricardo. Your wife has been systematically poisoning me for a year and a half. Marina grabbed for my phone desperately. This is absolutely ridiculous. Don't touch him, Ricardo said sharply, stepping between us protectively. I pulled out the blood test results. Dr. Martinez ran a comprehensive toxicology panel. 2.7 milligrams of esopiclone. That's a full dose of Lunesta taken daily for months. Marina's composure finally shattered completely. You don't understand the pressure I've been under constantly. Your father was depressed, barely functional after Helena died. So you decided to make it worse deliberately? I was trying to help him, she insisted. The confusion, the memory problems, that was just grief manifesting. The medication calmed him down and helped. The medication nearly destroyed my life completely, I said quietly. And you were planning to lock me away forever so you could steal my house. Ricardo picked up the commitment papers Marina had left on the counter, January 10th. You already scheduled this. For his own safety, she tried. For $875,000, I interrupted. The exact amount you received for selling my house to Peterson Development. The silence stretched until Felipe wandered into the kitchen, still holding his new game. Why is everyone so quiet and serious? He asked. And why is Mom crying? Because sometimes even the most skilled liars eventually run out of lies, I said gently. But the real surprise was still coming. The truth would devastate everyone, but it had to be told. Ricardo stood frozen in the kitchen, holding the commitment papers while Marina sobbed at the table. Felipe looked between the adults, sensing the terrible shift in his family's world that he couldn't fully comprehend. Marina, Ricardo said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. How long? Have you been planning this scheme? I answered for her, wanting this finished. 18 months, since the day after we buried Helena. I opened my manila folder and spread the evidence across the kitchen table like a prosecutor presenting to a jury. Here's her timeline written in her own handwriting. January 2nd, file court documents. January 10th, commitment. February 8th, property closing. March 15th, Arizona. Ricardo picked up Marina's planning document, his hands trembling visibly. You've already placed a deposit on a condominium in Arizona. $22,000 down payment, I said, paid for with my stolen pension checks over recent months. Marina finally looked up, mascara streaked down her cheeks. You don't understand what it's been like taking care of him constantly, dealing with his depression every day, taking care of me. I pulled out my bank statements. You've stolen $47,000 from my accounts in the past year. That's not caregiving, that's criminal embezzlement. Ricardo, please, Marina started, but I interrupted. Show him the medical reports, I said quietly. I placed Dr. Stevens' fraudulent dementia diagnosis next to Dr. Martinez's cognitive assessment. Perfect scores on every test, dated 4 days apart. Two doctors, two completely different conclusions. Want to guess which one Marina coached with false information? Ricardo read both documents, his face growing darker with each line. Dr. Stevens never actually examined you. Oh, properly, did he? 20-minute performance based entirely on Marina's fabricated lies, I confirmed. She told him I was violent, paranoid, dangerous to myself and others. I was protecting everyone from potential harm, Marina burst out desperately. You were scaring Felipe with your strange behavior constantly. What strange behavior exactly? Felipe interrupted, looking genuinely confused. Grandpa's been completely fine. You're the one who kept saying he was sick all the time. From the mouths of children comes truth. I played another recording. The paranoia is becoming worse daily. Yesterday, he threw a coffee mug directly at me. I never threw anything in my life, I said calmly. But Marina needed documented incidents of violence for the commitment hearing to succeed. Ricardo was pacing now, putting pieces together systematically. The wandering episode you told me about in detail never happened at all. The stove left on repeatedly. Complete fiction. The incontinence problems. Total fabrication. Every lie Ricardo named, I calmly debunked with concrete evidence. Audio recordings, video footage, medical tests, 18 months of systematic deception, all documented and completely undeniable. But why would you do this? Ricardo finally asked his wife directly. Paulo would have helped us financially if we'd just asked him. He always has before. Marina's carefully constructed mask slipped completely away. Help us? How exactly? Scrape by in this miserable house forever. Watch you. Work at that factory until your back gives out completely. I'm 36 years old, Ricardo. I deserve better than this pathetic existence. There it was finally. The truth behind all the elaborate lies. Better than what? I asked. A family that loves you genuinely? A home with no mortgage payments? A husband who works 65 hours weekly to support you and Felipe? Better than being poor and struggling, she screamed. Better than pretending your little philosophy professor pension and your dead wife's insurance money were going to solve our financial problems. Felipe stepped closer to me instinctively, understanding on some level who represented the real threat in this room. Mom, why are you saying mean things about Grandma Helena? Patricia ignored him completely. Wait, Marina ignored him completely. You have absolutely no idea what it's like being married to failure, watching other families have nice things while we live paycheck to paycheck, barely surviving. We weren't living. Paycheck to paycheck, Ricardo said quietly, his voice steady. You were spending everything I earned, plus Paulo's money, on things we didn't need and couldn't afford. I pulled out the final piece of evidence, the credit card statements I'd copied from Marina's purse secretly. 17,000 on clothes and jewelry, 9,000 on spa treatments and salon visits, 7,000 on restaurants and entertainment, all charged to cards in my name with forged signatures. Ricardo stared at the statements in disbelief. Marina, what is all this? But she was already moving toward the door, grabbing her purse and car keys. I'm not staying here to be attacked by a demented old man and his enabler son, she said. You're not going anywhere. I said calmly. Detective Sarah Brown is waiting for you outside right now. Marina froze completely. What are you talking about? I called the police 4 days ago, I explained. They're parked in front of the house at this moment, waiting for my signal. Through the kitchen window, we could all see the unmarked police car in the driveway clearly. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting justice take its natural course. The house sale was already in motion, but Marina had absolutely no idea who the real buyer was behind Peterson Development. Detective Brown's knock came exactly 30 seconds after I sent her the text message. Through the front window, I watched Marina's face cycle through panic, calculation, and desperate defiance in rapid succession. Mr. Paulo, Detective Brown said as I opened the door, we're ready to proceed with the arrest. She was a compact woman in her mid-40s, with the kind of steady authority that comes from handling difficult cases professionally. Behind her stood Officer Martinez and a crime scene photographer with equipment. Marina Wilson, Detective Brown said formally, you're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit involuntary commitment. This is completely insane. Marina backed toward the kitchen desperately. Ricardo, tell them your father is delusional and confused. You have the right to remain silent, Detective Brown continued, pulling out handcuffs. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Marina made one last desperate play for sympathy. Officer, I'm this man's primary caregiver. He has severe dementia and has been making wild accusations for months. Mom, we've reviewed 18 months of comprehensive evidence, Detective. Brown said. Video footage of you crushing pills into his coffee, audio recordings of you admitting to drugging him systematically, medical documentation proving systematic poisoning. The photographer was already taking pictures of my evidence spread across the kitchen table. These recordings could be fabricated easily, Marina said, her voice rising to near hysteria. Ricardo, you know I would never hurt your father deliberately. Detective Brown played a clip from my recorder. Once he's committed. Institutionally, we can visit twice yearly and perform as the grieving family. Marina's shoulders sagged visibly. That's taken completely out of context. What context makes drugging an elderly man acceptable? Officer Martinez asked pointedly. Ricardo finally spoke up. Detective, I had absolutely no idea any of this was happening. Marina told me Paulo was deteriorating, that he needed professional care urgently. Mr. Ricardo, Detective Brown clarified, you're not under investigation. Our evidence shows clearly you were deceived along with your father. Tyler had been standing silently. Felipe had been standing silently by my side, watching his mother get handcuffed. When Marina looked at him with desperate, pleading eyes, he moved closer to me protectively. Grandpa, he whispered, were you really sick at all? Never, I replied. Your mum was putting medicine in my coffee that made me sleepy and confused deliberately. Why would she do that to you? Because sometimes adults make terrible choices for money instead of doing what's right. Detective Brown was reading Marina her Miranda rights, while Officer Martinez documented the crime scene methodically. The pill crusher still sitting in the kitchen drawer, the mason jars of drugged coffee I'd saved as evidence, the commitment papers with forged signatures. The district attorney will be filing formal charges tomorrow morning, Detective Brown told me. Elder abuse in the first degree, fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and theft. She's looking at 4 to 8 years in state prison. What about the house sale? Ricardo asked suddenly. That's when I smiled for the first time in 18 months. Funny thing about that, I said. Marina did sell the house to Peterson Development. Signed all the papers last Thursday morning while you were at work. Ricardo looked confused. But how can they arrest her if the sale was legal? Because, I continued, Peterson Development is owned by my attorney, Margaret Hayes. The sale was designed to prevent Marina from profiting from her crimes. Detective Brown looked impressed. You set up a sting operation. I knew she'd try to close before I could be committed, I explained. So Margaret created a shell company, made a legitimate offer, and Marina signed over the deed, thinking she was about to become wealthy. Marina stared at me in absolute horror. You can't do that. The house is legally mine through power of attorney. Power of attorney obtained through fraud is completely invalid. Detective Brown said, the sale is void. But we already spent the down payment on the Arizona condo, Marina screamed. The Arizona condominium will be repossessed, I said calmly, along with everything else you bought with my stolen money. As they led Marina toward the police car, she turned back one last time. You'll never be able to take care of yourself, she shouted desperately. You need me to survive. I looked at my son, my grandson, the police officers treating me with respect and dignity. Then I looked at Marina directly. The only thing I needed, I said, was for you to stop poisoning me systematically. The car door slammed shut, and Marina Wilson disappeared from our lives forever. But the biggest surprise was still waiting in my study. The final lesson was about to begin. Marina spent New Year's night in Hennepin County Jail, probably thinking her lawyer would sort out the misunderstanding by morning. She had absolutely no idea that while she sat in a cell, I was making the phone. Calls that would complete her destruction permanently. January the 2nd, 9:30 a.m. I drove to Margaret Hayes' law office with Ricardo and Felipe. Paulo, Margaret said, the Peterson development sale is officially void as of this morning. The property reverts to your ownership completely. Good, I said. Now I want to make a real sale. I handed her a manila folder. Contact information for the Minnesota Alzheimer's Association. I want to deed the house to them as a charitable donation in Helena's memory. Ricardo looked shocked. Paulo, you don't have to do that. Yes, I do, I insisted. I pulled out Helena's photo from my wallet. Your mother spent her last months worrying about my future, afraid I'd be alone and vulnerable. This way, her memory funds research that might prevent other families from experiencing what we did. Margaret reviewed the documentation carefully. The house appraised at $920,000. After taxes, the donation will be worth approximately $840,000 to the association. Perfect, I said. I want it finalized today. That's incredibly generous, Paulo, Margaret said. Where will you live? I smiled. Sunset Manor Senior Living Community. I toured it 2 days ago. Independent living apartments, community activities, weekly card games. Helena would have loved it there. By early afternoon, the deed transfer was complete. The Minnesota Alzheimer's Association now owned my family home, with plans to sell it and fund research grants. In Helena Thompson's name, January 4th brought Marina's arraignment. I attended with Ricardo, sitting in the gallery while she faced Judge Williams. Your Honor, Marina's public defender said, my client was acting as a devoted caregiver to an elderly man with dementia. Counselor, Judge Williams interrupted, I've reviewed the evidence thoroughly. Video footage of your client systematically drugging the alleged victim. Audio recordings of her admitting to an 18-month fraud scheme. Medical documentation proving the victim has absolutely no cognitive impairment whatsoever. Marina stood in her orange jumpsuit, finally understanding that her lies wouldn't work in a courtroom. How does your client plead to charges of elder abuse in the first degree, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy? Not guilty, Your Honor. Judge Williams set bail at $55,000, money Marina no longer had access to. After the hearing, Detective Brown found me in the hallway. Mr. Paulo, I wanted you to know the Arizona Condominium Company is cooperating fully. They'll return Marina's down payment as soon as the criminal charges are resolved. I don't want the money back, I said. Donate it to elder abuse prevention programs. You're certain? I'm 70 years old with no children except Ricardo and no grandchildren except Felipe. I have everything I need. That afternoon, Ricardo helped me pack my belongings for the move to Sunset Manor. Paulo, I'm so sorry, he said for the 100th time. I should have known what she was doing to you. Son, Marina fooled medical professionals, police officers, and half the neighborhood. She was extraordinarily skilled at lying. How did you figure it out? I held up Helena's photo. Your mother taught philosophy for 38 years. She always said the best way to spot a liar is to pay attention to their contradictions. Marina's story had holes you could drive a truck through once I was sober enough to notice them. We loaded the last box into Ricardo's truck just as a car pulled into the driveway. It was Marina's sister from Wisconsin, looking confused and angry. "Where is Marina?" she demanded. "She was supposed to meet us in Arizona this weekend." Ricardo and I exchanged glances. "She's going to be delayed," I said politely. "About 4 to 8 years, depending on her sentence. Sometimes the truth is the cruelest gift you can give someone." March 22nd, 2025. Marina pleaded guilty to avoid a lengthy trial. I sat in the courtroom gallery, watching Judge Williams deliver her sentence. 4.5 years in state prison, $55,000 in restitution, and a permanent restraining order preventing her from contacting me or Felipe. "Your actions represent a particularly cruel form of elder abuse," Judge Williams said. "You systematically poisoned a grieving widower, stole his money, and attempted to have him permanently institutionalized for your financial gain." Marina's shoulders shook as she accepted the sentence. "No more Arizona dreams, no more stolen pension checks, no more crushing pills into coffee." Ricardo filed for divorce the same week. Full custody of Felipe with Marina, having no visitation rights until her release. Today, I'm sitting in my apartment at Sunset Manor, sharp as ever at 70. Felipe visits every Sunday, and we read books together, the same way Helena and I used to with Ricardo 45 years ago. I volunteer 4 days weekly at the Minnesota Alzheimer's Association, sharing my story. With other families, the research grant funded by Helena's house has already helped develop new early detection methods. Marina gets released in 2029. By then, Felipe will be 17, old enough to understand exactly who his mother really was. Some people think revenge is about anger, but the sweetest revenge is simply living well, surrounded by people who genuinely care about you. Justice served, memory preserved, life reclaimed.